I never thought moving into Sycamore Heights would turn into a living nightmare. The neighborhood seemed perfect, manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and excellent schools for my daughter, Lily. Little did I know that behind this picturesque facade lurked Karen Miller, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, or as I now call her, the HOA Karen from hell. My first encounter with Karen happened during the school's Fall Festival Committee meeting. As a new parent wanting to get involved, I volunteered to help organize the event. Karen, who simultaneously served as both HOA president and school board member, ran the meeting with military precision. "We've always done things a certain way here at Westfield Elementary," she announced with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've been organizing the Fall Festival for 7 years now, and I know exactly what works." When I suggested we could try including some multicultural food options to reflect our diverse community, Karen's perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. "That's not really what our families are looking for," she said dismissively. "We stick to traditional American cuisine here. It's what everyone prefers." The way several other parents shifted uncomfortably told me this wasn't actually the consensus, but I decided to pick my battles and let it go for now. After the meeting, I introduced myself properly, hoping we could start fresh. "I'm really excited to be part of the community," I said, extending my hand. "My daughter, Lily, has already made so many friends here." Karen gave my hand a limp shake. "Yes, well, I noticed your front garden could use some attention. The HOA has specific guidelines about acceptable plant varieties and lawn maintenance. I'll email you the 37-page document," she smiled tightly. "We take pride in our neighborhood aesthetics." That should have been my warning sign. Over the next few weeks, I received no fewer than 6 violation notices for everything from my mailbox being 2 inches taller than regulation height to the shade of beige on my garage door being desert sand instead of the approved autumn wheat. Each notice came with Karen's personal handwritten note expressing her disappointment in my failure to comply promptly. The ridiculous citations continued. One morning, I found a notice taped to my front door claiming my holiday wreath contained non-approved seasonal foliage. It was a simple pine wreath with a red ribbon. When I called the number on the notice, Karen herself answered. "Oh yes, the wreath," she said as if she'd been expecting my call. "The shade of red in your ribbon doesn't comply with our holiday color palette. Section 14. Subsection C clearly states all decorative accents must be holly berry red or Christmas cardinal, and yours appears to be more of a." She paused dramatically, "crimson flash, which is expressly prohibited." I checked the actual HOA guidelines. No such color restrictions existed. When I pointed this out in an email to the entire board, Karen replied to all, claiming I was deliberately misinterpreting the aesthetic intent of the guidelines and suggested that newcomers often struggle to understand the community standards we've worked so hard to establish. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Meanwhile, at school, Lily came home upset one day. "Mrs. Miller said my science project isn't good enough for the showcase," she sniffled. "She said it doesn't meet the standards they expect." I was furious. Lily had worked for weeks on her project about renewable energy, complete with a working solar-powered model. I decided it was time to speak up, so I requested a meeting with the principal and arrived to find Karen already there, arms crossed defensively. As curriculum oversight chair for the school board, she began before I could even speak, "I have final approval on all showcase projects. Your daughter's project lacks the sophistication we require. The principal, Dr. Evans, looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Lily's project exceeds the requirements for 5th grade, I countered calmly. If you look at the rubric, she's met or exceeded every criterion. I pulled out the guidelines and placed them on the table. Karen's face flushed. I don't need to look at anything. I know what's appropriate for this school. Perhaps in whatever school district you came from, standards were lower, but here at Westfield, I have a master's degree in education. And I've taught science for 12 years, I interrupted. Lily's project is exceptional and deserving of showcase inclusion. I turned to Dr. Evans. Would you agree that the project meets the criteria? Dr. Evans cleared his throat. It does indeed meet all requirements, he admitted. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she conceded with a tight, "Fine," before storming out. Lily's project was allowed in the showcase, where it received honorable mention. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I received another HOA violation notice. This one claiming my oak tree branches extended 3 inches over my neighbor's property line and needed immediate trimming. What made this particular? What was particularly absurd was that my neighbor, a sweet elderly lady named Mrs. Chen, had specifically told me she enjoyed the shade from that tree during summer afternoons. When I went to speak with Mrs. Chen to confirm, she looked confused. Karen came by yesterday telling me I should complain about your tree, she confided. She said it was damaging my property value. I told her I love your tree, but she said she'd file the complaint for me anyway. Mrs. Chen shook her head. She's always been intense, even more so since her husband became city councilman last year. That explained a lot. Karen wasn't just an HOA president and school board member, she was part of a family positioning themselves as the unofficial rulers of our small community. Power was their currency, and they collected it like rare coins. Things escalated further when I decided to run for the vacant position on the school board. I believed my background in education would be valuable, and several other parents encouraged me to apply. When Karen found out, she transformed from merely unpleasant to actively hostile. You really don't understand how things work here, she cornered me in the school parking lot one afternoon, her voice dripping with condescension. The school board isn't for newcomers. We need people who understand our community values. I believe diverse perspectives strengthen leadership, I replied evenly, and several parents have expressed support for my candidacy. Her eyes flashed dangerously. You'll regret this, she hissed before marching away. The campaign turned ugly fast. Flyers appeared on windshields claiming I wanted to radically transform the school curriculum with experimental teaching methods. Anonymous emails circulated among parents questioning my qualifications and commitment to traditional values. Despite never stating these positions, I found myself constantly defending against misrepresentations of my views. During the parent-teacher conference night, I discovered someone had replaced my carefully prepared candidate information sheets with altered versions that claimed I supported eliminating honors programs and traditional grading. When I confronted Karen, who was stationed at the table next to mine, she feigned innocence. Perhaps you printed the wrong information, she suggested with mock concern. It would be a shame if parents got the wrong impression about your progressive ideas. I didn't lose my cool. Instead, I smiled. Fortunately, I always keep digital backups, I replied, pulling out my tablet and showing her my original materials. And I have a friend at the copy shop who confirmed a certain school board member requested these altered versions yesterday afternoon. Would you like to see the receipt with your signature? I was bluffing, but the flash of panic in her eyes told me my guess had hit the mark. Within minutes, she'd disappeared, and by the time I returned from retrieving new, correct copies of my materials, the altered versions had vanished from the table. That weekend, a small group of teachers invited me to coffee to discuss my candidacy. "We can't officially endorse anyone," explained Ms. Rivera, the beloved 6th grade social studies teacher, "but several of us are concerned about the current board's direction. Ever since Karen joined 3 years ago, teacher input has been systematically dismissed. Last year's budget reallocated funds from teacher development to administrative priorities," added Mr. Gaines, the science department head. "When questioned, we were told it wasn't our place to challenge board decisions. And the discrimination is real," whispered Mrs. Washington, a 20-year veteran of the school. "Students from certain backgrounds consistently receive fewer opportunities. When we raise concerns, suddenly our performance reviews suffer. Many teachers are afraid to speak up. Their testimonies shocked me. What had seemed like Karen's personal vendetta against me was actually part of a larger pattern of misuse of power. They shared documentation, emails, meeting minutes, budget reports, all painting a disturbing picture of systematic discrimination and mismanagement. We've been collecting evidence," Ms. Rivera explained, "but we need someone on the inside who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo." I agreed to review their documentation and consider how to address these issues if elected. That evening, I carefully organized everything they'd shared, along with my own records of Karen's behavior, in a file in my garage office. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Despite Karen's efforts, many parents saw through the tactics. The election was scheduled for a Tuesday evening meeting where both candidates would give final statements before the vote. The weekend before, I spent hours in my garage preparing my presentation materials and drafting my speech. Monday morning, I stepped outside to find my recycling bin contents strewn across my lawn. As I cleaned up the mess, I noticed Karen speed walking past, pointedly looking away. Just a coincidence, I told myself, though I didn't entirely believe it. That afternoon, I received an ANO. "If you know what's good for you and your daughter, you'll withdraw your candidacy," rasped a poorly disguised voice that sounded suspiciously like Karen. Accidents happen to people who don't understand their place. Rather than being intimidated, I reported the call to the police and the school superintendent. The officer who took my report seemed skeptical until I played the recorded call. "That's concerning," he admitted. "We can't prove who it is, but we'll document it." That evening, Lily and I worked late finalizing my presentation boards in the garage. We finally went inside around 10 p.m., leaving the materials neatly organized on the workbench, ready to load into my car the next morning. The sound of breaking glass jolted me awake at 2:12 a.m. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I smelled the smoke. I ran to Lily's room, grabbed her from bed, and rushed outside just as flames began to engulf the garage. I called 911 immediately, watching in horror as everything we'd worked on, and much more, burned before our eyes. The neighbors emerged from their homes in various states of nightmare, gasping at the inferno that had once been my garage. Mrs. Chen hurried over with a blanket for Lily, who stood trembling in her pajamas, watching wide-eyed as firefighters battled the blaze. "I saw someone," Mrs. Chen whispered to me just before the fire. I couldn't sleep and was having tea by my window. A woman in workout clothes was sneaking around your garage. I thought, that's strange at this hour, but then I dozed off. The explosion woke me. The fire department arrived quickly and managed to contain the blaze before it spread to the house. As the firefighters worked, I noticed something odd near the side of the garage, a gasoline can that wasn't mine, and a few feet away, a designer scarf I recognized immediately as Karen's signature accessory, partially burned but with its distinctive pattern still visible. "Ma'am, do you know who this might belong to?" asked the fire investigator, holding up the scarf in a gloved hand. "Actually, I do," I replied, a chill running down my spine. I told the investigators about the threatening call, the campaign sabotage, and Mrs. Chen's sighting. When I mentioned Karen Miller's name, one of the officers exchanged a knowing glance with his partner. "We've had other complaints involving Mrs. Miller," he said carefully. "Nothing this serious, but there's a pattern of concerning behavior." By dawn, the fire was fully extinguished, leaving a charred skeleton where my garage had stood. The investigators worked methodically, taking photographs and collecting evidence. They found a clear point of origin, the broken window where an accelerant had been poured and ignited. This was no accident, the lead investigator confirmed. Someone deliberately set this fire. Mrs. Chen had more to share with the police. Her home security camera, installed after a package theft last Christmas, had captured footage of the street. Though distant, it clearly showed a figure matching Karen's description approaching my property at 1:58 a.m., then running away moments before the first flames appeared. The distinctive scarf was visible even in the night footage. The police arrived at Karen's house by 6 a.m. They found matching glass fragments in her car trunk, gasoline residue on her shoes, and a half-empty gas can in her garage matching the one left at the scene. Her husband, apparently unaware of her nighttime activities, was shocked into silence. What Karen hadn't known was that my garage also contained evidence for a discrimination case being built against her by several families in the school district. Documents, recorded conversations, and witness statements detailing her systematic discrimination against students from minority backgrounds were all stored in a fireproof safe, which survived the fire intact. Her attempt to destroy evidence had actually accelerated the investigation. The school board meeting that Tuesday evening took a dramatically different turn. Instead of an election, the community gathered to hear the shocking news of Karen's arrest for arson, attempted destruction of evidence, and reckless endangerment of a child. The room buzzed with disbelief as police officers explained the overwhelming evidence against her. The superintendent took the podium, visibly shaken. In light of these disturbing developments, the board will be conducting a thorough review of all decisions made during Mrs. Miller's tenure, she announced. We encourage anyone with concerns about past board actions to come forward. One by one, parents and teachers did exactly that. Stories emerged of systematic discrimination, funds misallocation, and retribution against those who questioned authority. The evidence from my fireproof safe provided documentation supporting many of these claims. But the real shock came during her bail hearing. Because of the premeditated nature of the crime, the endangered child, and the revelation of the discrimination evidence, the judge denied bail entirely. The prosecutor announced they would be pursuing the maximum penalties for all charges, with a potential sentence of life imprisonment for the attempted murder charge alone. When the judge announced the decision to deny bail and hold her for trial on the most serious charges, Karen's perfectly composed facade finally cracked completely. "This is ridiculous!" she shrieked, mascara streaming down her face as officers led her away. "Do you know who I am? I run this community. You can't do this to me. Her perfectly manicured nails clawed at the air as she was escorted from the courtroom.